Okay, now let's talk about fiber. So the big thing about fiber is that you need to know is that it's not broken down by our digestive system. So we can't break down fiber. So how do we do that? Well, in our body, we're able to utilize a lot of those different compounds, which then will enact that fiber to be taken into our bodies and then used. But then obviously we will get rid of it later. So then it's also really involved with the structural parts of the plants, and fiber is really one of those that we look at in terms of health. And so if it's also associated with the reduction of like colon cancer and heart disease if you get enough fiber. So like fiber 1, all of those different different ways of getting that fiber is very, very important. And we look at it in a soluble and in an insoluble mean of ways. All organisms have to have protein composed of amino acids. We look at 20 of them, and plants make all 20 of those amino acids that are used for those protein synthesis. We, however, can only 11 of those. We can only synthesize 11 of those amino acids, but plants can synthesize all 20 of them. So very essential in the role of plants and of animals. Now let's talk about the roles of proteins within plants. One of the biggest of these 6 here that you see is the defense, or the antibodies that are actually in the plants that we grow, even in field crops. So the antibodies that would help you and I fight off different infectious diseases and different things like the flu. That's very, very important. Hormones, it's going to regulate metabolic activity. Structural, it's going to have give the components of those muscles and those tendons. So all of these are really, really important in terms of how the roles of proteins are very important in plants, and especially in field crops that we grow. So vitamins are very, very multiplex. So they're going to be they have a lot of different jobs. They're very, very small organic compounds, and they're going to help us give our regulation of metabolism. It's gonna help our metabolism be better in terms of how we're going to synthesize those vitamins within those plants and utilize them within our body. So those compounds are very important when you look at vitamins and how they're going to establish a good way of giving to the plant, and then also to us when we digest them. And then plants can then synthesize, obviously, the most important vitamins, but vitamin D, because we all know where we get vitamin D, and that's also very, very important. So there's 13 of those essential vitamins that must be obtained from the diet that we eat. A, vitamin D, vitamin E, vitamin K, and vitamin C. Very important vitamins, and again, you have to have them whether you get them from your diet or you take a multivitamin. So there is the structure. Okay, so this is the lipids, so fats and oils, and we talked a little bit about last chapter about how these are organic compounds and that they're insoluble in the water. Okay, so there are 3 major types of lipids, and all 3 of those major types of lipids are marketed in different ways. So we'll talk about simple lipids on down to steroid lipids and how they interact within our food and how we buy them. So simple lipids, very important when you're looking at different types of fatty acids like saturated, unsaturated, and then trans fats. But those are actually chemically, they're described as like triglycerides. And then that kind of brings up the fact of the 3 fatty acids and how that's going to be implemented into our body. So these lipids are then from animals that are called fats, and then that are solids at room temperature. So when you're thinking of those lipids, butter would be a great example, or lard or margarine, because they're a solid at room temperature. Other lipids from plants, like oils, are a liquid at room temperature. So anything from like canola oil to corn oil to vegetable oil, those are all from plants, but then they're also oils, and they're kept as an oil at room temperature. So complex lipids. These lipids are very essential to the membranes in plants. So how they're going to interact with not just the membranes in the plant, but then when you're looking from a nutritional standpoint, it's going to help us with our liver, our brain, the spinal tissue in us, and how it interacts within our body. Cholesterol is a steroid lipid that is in animals, and that is also very essential for membrane. But if we have too much cholesterol, we have a good cholesterol, we have a bad cholesterol. If we have too much of the bad cholesterol, that will definitely increase the chance for a lot of different diseases, and it's not going to be good for you in the long term. So health and lipids. So we consume a lot of quantities of lipids. I mean, we know, and we've talked about in these last couple chapters, how obesity and malnutrition, undernutrition are going to be factors in different types of things like heart disease and diabetes, which is a big one, because we're digesting all of these lipids that then turn into trans fatty acids and then the bad cholesterol. But one thing that is important to note is that the omega-3 fatty acids have really good health benefits. I mean, you can actually go into any type of store that sells vitamins and get an omega-3 fatty acid, because if you're not getting that in your daily food, then you need that. So that's actually something good for your body that you can buy at a store. Organic, and they're free of ions. So what does that mean? That means that there are 17 essential minerals for humans, but because they're free of ions, the consumption of them is going to be way different than vitamins that we've talked about. So they're obtained from meats and plants, okay, not just from plants. Water, okay, so we've talked about how water is very essential for life. You have to have it, comprised of obviously hydrogen, H2O, hydrogen and carbon, very, very important, comprised of about 60% of the human body. So 60% of your body is comprised of water. Very, very important to make those compounds that we've talked about. And then, one big thing is rehydration. And if you're losing a lot of water, that could really hurt the way you are, your physical health. And that could deteriorate within days if you are extremely dehydrated, excuse me. So that wraps up this chapter, and we will go into a lot more activities in class with all of these vitamins, minerals, and compounds, and kind of the chemistry part of how we grow these field plants. And so be ready. Make sure you've watched these lectures, and we'll see you then.